You're winning. You're winning. You're winning. You're winning. Hello and good evening. I am your host, Coach Love, and welcome to another episode of Epic Understanding. Guys, we have a double header for you tonight. First, I have Dr. Carrie Kerr Mcavoy, and then I have an Olympic champion for you, along with some chat woman to woman. So we're going to have a fabulous time tonight, and I just want to brag for a second on my first guest. You know how someone is charming and knowledgeable and beautiful? And so all of a sudden you find yourself sucked in and wanting to know what it is they know? Well, that's what I have with Dr. Carrie Kerr Mcavoy tonight. Isn't she fantastic? So I'm just going to go ahead and bring her up. Hello, how are you?
Well, wow, with that introduction, that's an incredible start. Thank you so much, Coach Love. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I have to say, I'm so impressed by all that you've been giving. You're such a giver. You're constantly giving us information about narcissism. You're so generous with your personal story and the things that you've lived through. You know, so many times we think because we're smart and because we're educated and because, you know, we are very accomplished, sometimes things can't happen to us. But they do.
They
Things
do.
things absolutely do. And you know what? I forgot to tell everybody you're a TikTok star. She's a TikTok star, everybody, as well as being very accomplished. So there we go. Why don't you share a little bit about your background, Carrie?
Sure. Yes, I'm a licensed psychologist. I have over 20 years of counseling experience. And for the first half of my adult life, I had a practice. I operated out of a private practice and saw general clients. I had a specialty in postpartum depression, along with seeing other host of things like depression, anxiety, personality disorders, the gamut that runs into the office. And then in 2014 and 15, my marriage ended suddenly when my husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And my whole world imploded, just literally imploded. I started writing full time. I closed my practice. I was in such rough shape that I started writing and doing something different. But then I made a grave error. I jumped into a second relationship thinking that I could somehow recapture what I had lost. And I ended up marrying a nightmare. I married the worst possible person I could meet. I married a malignant narcissist or a narcissistic sociopath. Spent 3 years in that relationship, 2 years in the marriage. And that ended in 2019. And I began immediately writing again because one of the things I've learned that writing for me is a way to heal. So I got back into writing. And as I was writing, I started branding and getting out there and meeting people. And that's when I was more active on Instagram, got into TikTok a year ago. And since then, I've found like this incredible world of being able to interact with people in a very different way from counseling, and yet really similar because there's a hunger and a need for help. So that's what I've been doing. I've been helping people develop healthier relationships and recognize the risk of toxic relationships.
Oh wow, that is fantastic. I'm curious from your perspective about what percentage of people have experienced toxic and narcissistic relationships?
That's a great question. I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but what I do know is that we used to think about 0.1 to 1% of the population is narcissistic. Now some are theorizing that number is way too low. I've seen research on a meta-analysis thinking that's more closer to 4 to 7%, but there's experts out there like Dr. Ramani, who has a social media platform herself that's extremely large, who thinks maybe it's closer to 25 to 30% of the population has significant narcissistic traits, and maybe even narcissistic personality disorder. So when you think about that, when you think that the numbers may be closer to 10%, these people are insatiable when it comes to relationships. They use people much the same that we would use resources and tools. So that means they're churning through a lot of relationships. So if you have 10% of the population, and think about if they have maybe 5 to 10 to 20 relationships in their lifetime that is toxic, now you're talking a significant part of the population has experienced this. Alarming, isn't it? I find it, here's the odd part. You think that your story is unique. You think that what happened to you is so in the realm of unbelievable. And then you meet other people who've gone through a similar type of relationship. And it's almost as if you've met somebody who has the same pattern, the same blueprint for what you just experienced. It's the oddest thing that happens is when I find they're like, that happened to you, that happened to me. So there's a lot of commonality in these experiences, which is really, I found initially very shocking.
Wow, that is amazing. Let's try to take a look at this question. She's actually a YouTube personality in her own right. Big ups, Janet. She loves the UK. She says, we all have the trait, but it is a goal not to have them all. Balance, never too much of anything. So do you think we all have narcissistic traits?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with her. I think we're all on the spectrum. It's a developmental stage that we all have to pass through. We all have a need to want to be understood, and we all have a need to want to be special and seen as unique. Now, what happens around those needs that make us less or more toxic is what decides whether or not how pathological we are, how emotionally immature we are. But all of us have some basic, I know there's arguments. Is it really, do we dare call it healthy narcissism? Maybe there's a better word. Good self-esteem. So healthy narcissism is good self-esteem, but pathological narcissism is very manipulative, power hungry, and destructive.
So how come narcissism isn't being selfish?
It is, I would say selfishness is on the low end, maybe the immature version of narcissistic. So if you think of us, if we're starting from 0 to 100, and no one, by the way, is ever at 0, and I really hope never to meet a 100, but if we're somewhere on that continuum, I would say selfishness probably is a lower end of it. It's yes, it says I'm entitled, I deserve special privileges, but maybe not enough to where I'm actually trying to manipulate, deceive, and control other people. It's just that maybe I just want my way when I can have it. Yeah. That's how I guess I would define selfishness. It's just trying to get an advantage over others without really trying to do a loss of conscience.
Okay, so I'm kind of wondering, how can we talk about normal, the normal traits, someone really just trying to look out for their own best interests versus someone who is actually toxic and harmful?
Yeah.
How do we, differentiate that?
Yeah, I think that's a really critical differentiation, a really critical difference. I would think on the more healthier end, more the low end, I guess that's how I'm going to talk about it, low end of narcissism. There is a recognition that you're a person, that you have feelings, desires, hopes, dreams of your own, and that I'm going to try to negotiate around them reasonably. That would be more of a healthier end of it. Whereas at a higher end, there's a failure to see you, to really appreciate your uniqueness, your rights, your privileges as well. And so I'm going to use you much the same way I would use a car. I would see you as more of a tool or an advantage to me, an asset to me, and then utilize you to the degree that I can. I think another way to differentiate the two is the degree then that I have a need to control you. So at a low end, we don't generally try to manipulate people a whole lot other than maybe to get our needs met, like a favor, or I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it. We might see them as we might use them, make requests of them, but at a higher end, we wouldn't request, we would deceive them and manipulate them. So it would vary from, I would go through you with your permission versus I would manipulate you deceptively without your permission in order to get an advantage.
I love that. I would manipulate you deceptively without getting your permission. You know what that sounds like to me?
What?
The essence of cheating.
Yeah, it is. I mean, because here's the other thing is that you probably have noticed, especially in the TikTok realm, there's this, we banter about the word terminology of narcissistic abuse. Have you noticed nobody's really slowing down and defining it? We all act like we know what it is when we really haven't said what it is. I recently came across an outstanding definition. It was written by Dr. Kristen Milstead. She's an author of Why Can't I Just Leave? She defines it as this: it is it's the use of deception in order to gain an advantage of power and control over another person. So because there's abuse, there's domestic abuse. But how does that differ from narcissistic abuse? It's the actual practice of creating a distorted perception and a distorted reality in order to have an advantage over you. Whereas abuse is just power, might makes right, so I plow through you.
Okay.
Yeah, do you see how they differ? So domestic violence is saying, I want this, I'm going to express my anger with you this way because I deserve the right to express my anger this way. It's a way of managing emotions, making the other person manage your emotions. But narcissistic abuse is where you actually distort reality for the sense of power and control over the other person. So you would say, no, it's not a problem. I really do love you. No, I really actually don't. I'm cheating behind your back, but I don't want to disrupt my life with you because I have a comfortable home here and you cook and feed me. So why would I want to lose that? So I'm going to lie to you in order to get around you, but you won't know that.
So I'm tracking with you. Cheating is like, that is the formula. And when I define that, it's the fact that the person did not let the other person know. Like, if they take away your decision-making power, there are some people who will continue in a relationship even though they know the other person has a partner. But the fact is, they know they got to make the decision.
Exactly. Yeah, it's when you lose your choice, you lose your voice, you lose control over, and you don't even know that you're losing it. That's what's so particularly vicious about this form of abuse is the loss of having the right to choose.
So, a Facebook user is bringing up this. Do they have boundaries? Are they play the game until you figure out how much you want to be put, how much you want to put up with is what I think it says there.
Yeah. No, they don't have, I mean, they have boundaries, and the boundaries is to take advantage of the most that they can take advantage of. This is how I kind of liken it. I find narcissistic people's view of the world to be like a competition. It's warlike. So imagine that you're in a brutal world where every country is at war with every other country. So they're playing the game to the advantage that they can win. We don't assume that. The rest of the world assumes that we have allies, and then some of them are enemies, but some are allies, and we don't actually see everybody possibly competition. But to a narcissist, there is no one that is not competition. Everybody is an enemy. Literally, even those that you're married, even your children, they're antagonistic even to their children, believe it or not.
I believe it. You just said, because I really can just sense people. And when I was younger, I would say that person makes me feel funny. Okay, so that's the terminology I would use. But now as an adult, I sense it. I was like, why is this person being competitive with me? And it'll be verbally or about nothing. I was like, we're not in a race. Why is this a competition. And I'll tell you something very subtle that people do that always raises my ear. And you can be in a very affectionate relationship, but you'll say, I love you. And they'll say, I love you more. And I think, why do you, why? It's not a competition.
Yeah, the fact did you know I wrote a book, and the book is called Love You More.
Wow. Is that I did not know that
Yeah.
particular piece that it was called Love You More. Okay, so one more fabulous thing about Carrie, guys. She's an author too. But I did know you were an author. I didn't know that the name of your book was I Love You More. Tell me, why did you choose that
Yeah,
title?
it's called Love You More, because what would happen in my relationship with this toxic person is I would say, I love you. He goes, love you more. And then I'd say, no, I love you more. He goes, no, I love you more. You have no idea how much I love you. I love you more. It was a competition, and he
Yeah,
had to always win.
exactly. I constantly think, stop that. Now, some people I notice they'll do that because it's in their social group, but other people, they do it and they really, really mean it. Like and there are other traits to go along with that.
Right.
And so I started just saying, okay.
Yeah, I could never say I love you. I could never say I love you. He would put it into a competition of like who had the last word.
Right.
Now, the ironic part, which is the other reason I labeled this as Love You More, is because he was a serial cheater. He never was not cheating.
Oh, yeah.
So here he was claiming I love. So that's the gaslighting. And causing it was also causing cognitive dissonance. He would say I love you. I would say I love you. No, I love you more. And then he'd say you have no idea how much I love you. Meanwhile, he was never faithful, not ever to me, not ever. I didn't know that until 2 months into the marriage. But talk about my world exploding, my mind blowing. So there was another part of that question the Facebook user asked that I want to get back to about boundaries, because I think it's so pivotal. Because I start talking about the narcissist has incredibly rigid boundaries, but they expect their victims to have no boundaries. In fact,
Yes.
they will push through all their boundaries over and over and over again. Yeah,
That
and he's exactly right, or she's exactly right. They will push you until you stop putting up with it. And usually when you stop putting up with it is when they be prepared to leave you. That's when the death knell for the relationship for sure is starting to occur, is when you say, no, I'm not doing this.
And you want to know something? I think that it is important to have boundaries in the first place. Like, one of the things that I wish I was taught at an early age is to have boundaries. I was never taught that. I was always taught to give and to share, and so that can be dangerous, to always be that giving.
It
Yeah,
is. And I was raised in a similar background. I learned at church that it was joy was Jesus first, others second, and you last.
Mm-hmm.
And if you aren't careful, that means you should. And I was taught that you need to love others before you love yourself. That's actually not what it says, but that's how so for me, when you grow up in a more dysfunctional home, boundaries are seen as optional. It's certainly children aren't really often allowed to have boundaries. And so as a result, they're really encouraged not to. They're encouraged to sort of serve for the purpose or the function of the family. So yeah, so people who are more toxic pick up on that, and that makes those of us who have that kind of background an easy target for them because of that, which is really not good. I agree.
So if you have better boundaries, will you kind of block yourself from narcissists a little bit?
Well, that's an interesting question. There's a great book out there by Don Hennessy called How He Gets Into Her Head. It's the name of the title, How He Gets Into Her Head.
Wow.
Hennessy works in the law enforcement in Ireland, and he's worked with domestic violence clients for over 30 years. And he found that there are predators there. He calls them psychophiles. That's his name he created. Instead of pedophiles, he calls them psychophiles. He says that if you meet a skilled enough offender, that they will pretty much overwhelm you and that they'll pull you into a relationship. That And if you haven't gotten pulled into a toxic relationships because you have not met a skilled enough offender. That's what he says. So he says, don't get arrogant and think that somehow you're just all that and you're fortunate and you're weeding them out. No, no, no. If you meet somebody who's skilled enough, they're going to be able to pull you into a relationship, which I
Wow.
certainly discovered. In fact, I believe now, this is just my theory, I believe the person I met had burned through so many relationships that he deliberately targeted a psychologist just for fun. I think that he, just much the way that serial killers get tired of killing and they begin to play with the FBI, I think he thought it would be fun to see what would happen if he got into a relationship with a therapist. Can they
You
catch
know,
on fast enough,
right. You know what? When you see a toxic person, one of the things I say is that person's been them a long time.
Yeah.
They have been them, they've been doing this a long time,
Yeah.
and that they're a professional, at
That's
it.
a great thing. I like that. In fact, I would say one of the things women need to get better with is to set a boundary purposefully early on in the relationship when they meet somebody. Set a simple, low risk kind of boundary, like I don't text after 10 or something easy, and then see
Mhm.
what happens because toxic people will push it. They'll purposely push it.
Absolutely. I tell you what, I just got done, and it was Janet I think I was talking to, or maybe one of my other girlfriends, but I said, "Say no early. Say no early." And this is for women and for men.
Yeah.
Because I have to tell you, Carrie, I am meeting new people like I am drinking out of a water hose. I really love people and I enjoy having relationships and things of this nature, right? But I found that even recently, I got into a relationship with someone. I wanted to, help her out. I gave and gave and gave, and I was like happy to give and give and give. The moment, the moment that I did not agree with her line of thinking, attack,
Yeah. Yeah.
attack. I was like, wow, wow, and I was like, and um, I noticed that in some other relationships, and I had this idea of, setting boundaries. And so I was good. But to your point, you can meet somebody that is very skilled, and they had an idea, they were so hurt about everything in their past. And then I got sucked in. I'm like, doggone it.
Oh, I know, I know. I met somebody myself about 2 years ago. Sweet person, super helpful. I knew there was a little narcissistic traits. This is a friend, and next thing I know, man, she unleashed. I don't remember. I think she decided she's going to help me out and tell me some things about myself that I didn't ask for. It was abusive. I ended up blocking her at the end of like an hour and a half long barrage of attack. So it is. I think it's good for all of us to sort of walk in carefully. In fact, you were asking me 7 points I wish all women knew, and one of them I had on my list is no one deserves your trust. It has to be earned, or
Mhm.
your right to yourself, the information about yourself. All of this has to be earned. And I think we make a grave error when we just give people this access thinking we're being kind, and we don't realize that we really need to people need to earn that from us. We need to see that they deserve that from us.
Wow. Wow. Um, I'm just flabbergasted at how much I am absorbing from you and enjoying you. I have like about 30 questions that I'm just trying to keep them all in line in my head. We are here with Dr. Carrie Kerr McAvery, and she's fabulous. She's absolutely fabulous. You can find her on TikTok and on Instagram. Hold up your book again. Hold up your book again.
It's called Love You More. The
Love.
harrowing, I'm trying to find a way to love you more, the harrowing tale of lies, sex addiction, and double cross. Love you more. Sorry, I meant a murder.
Ooh,
So
ooh.
it is a memoir. It is written. It's a true story, but I wrote it like a novel. I wrote it like a true crime novel.
That is, oh my goodness, that is fabulous. I wanted to go back to this comment. Someone said that they just wish they had known this information earlier. Honestly, I think that we should, young people should get a class on this. So, I mean, I don't think you can ever get perfect at it. Obviously, you were, a mental health professional and you knew everything already, right? But it still happened. So
Right.
there is someone who's out there trying to play the game harder, right?
Right.
At the same time, once you experience it and you know that it's not you, it simply just doesn't feel as bad.
Yeah, I think that it does help. I mean, I know now stepping out, I'm much better at picking up the signs faster. I mean, I say that carefully because that doesn't mean someone might want to try to, on purpose take advantage of me just to prove that they could do it. So, there's always predators. I think that's what we need to be aware of. There is always predators. I think of like people living in the Amazon or some remote place where they live around leopards and very dangerous animals. You need to learn the fact that the world has predators in it. There are people who don't think the way that you think, and they want it to, in fact, they get fun. This is the other part that's really kind of sickening about this whole situation, is that their pleasure is to create pain and suffering for you. They want that to happen. That's how they gain their power and control, is to see that it causes you pain.
Wow,
Yeah,
that is.
but we don't talk about that, do we? We don't say, honey, there are people out here that are going to actually feed off your pain. You need to watch for that group. Kindness is not a universal trait among every person. It's not.
Mm-hmm. Wow, wow. That is pretty profound. Do you think we need to teach kids that? Do you?
I think we need to help them, maybe not children, I would say more teenagers, young adults. I think we need to help people because did you make the assumption, because this is an assumption I made, did you make the assumption that people generally saw the world probably the way that you did?
Well, I don't know if I thought of it that way. I made the assumption that people were good.
Yes, yes. They count on that, by the way. That's a
Yeah.
trait they're looking for.
You know, that's the assumption that I made. And I kind of still make that assumption, but I have more natural boundaries for people to prove that they are not good. And so I don't necessarily trust people with my own best interests all the time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's a great book out there by Gavin de Becker. Have you heard of him? It's called The Gift of Fear.
No, I have to say that my aunt used to tell me I didn't have sense enough to be scared. So
Yeah, Gavin de Becker is a fascinating guy. He wrote a book called The Gift of Fear, and his story in the beginning is horrific. It's a shocking story about his own experience of his childhood with his parents, how his mother shot his father, and the kids were in the house. And so he talked about how there is a way in which to pick up escalating violence and dangerousness, but most of the time we overlook it or ignore it. And he says there are warning signs. Our gut, our body is wired to pick up that, but we've been culturally trained to squash that warning. And I know that when I met the person that I met and married, I did have warning. There was some things that I kind of noticed that were a little off. He quickly tried to take over and be too helpful and in a way, and he put me in a position of saying, "You're going to let me help, are you? You're not going to be one of those women." By the way, that's called typecasting. So when they say to you, "You're not going to be one of those people," or you're not somebody who thinks they're too big for this or too, whenever they sort of like cast you into a stereotype that you want to resist, it's called typecasting.
That's good. You know
Yeah.
what? Let's get into. I love that. So typecasting. I said the other day, that I sometimes feel like people want me to fit into their box. And when I don't fit into their box, it's an irritant. It's like, I'm sorry, I'm not what you expected, but I am me.
Right, right. When you hear them, then when you don't fit into the box and then criticize you, even in a positive way,
Mm-hmm.
like, I didn't think you were one of those women, or I didn't think you'd be like that. We
Mm-hmm.
need to turn our radar up and realize that is actually, they're now trying to manipulate and control the narrative.
Woo! Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So what do you call it when someone takes information and they flips the narrative? You're like, what are you talking about? They just take it and they create a whole narrative that makes them the victim.
Yes,
What
yes.
do
I'm
you
gonna say
call that?
you're describing gaslighting. You're describing.
Oh, it's gaslighting. That's
Mhm,
okay. I'm glad
mhm.
I have a term for that.
Yeah, that's a form of gaslighting, and gaslighting can take on a whole host of appearances. It can be even served up as love or a compliment, but really it's not. It's not.
Wow. Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good one. Listen, I'll be rewatching this. That is so good. Let's go through some other terms because you have some terminology here. One of my favorites is this term flying monkey.
Mhm.
Okay, what is that all about?
So flying monkey comes from the Wizard of Oz. You know how the Wicked Witch of the West sends
Mhm.
out her minions to attack Dorothy? So she
Uh-huh.
doesn't attack her directly. She sends others to attack her for her. So how
Mhm.
that happens in narcissistic abuse is, so when the narcissist is getting ready to leave,
Mhm.
this person will begin to create a scenario in which there's a new narrative being projected, which is to anticipate what the victim's going to do or say. So
Mhm.
say, for example, let's create a scenario so it's more understandable. Say, let's make, and so just to break gender, because usually it's men are more narcissistic than women, but let's pretend it's a woman. All right. So
Okay.
she's getting ready to leave her husband, and she knows that he's going to protest and he has good relationships with the neighbors. So what she'll do to the neighbors is she'll start to plan ahead how he may respond and what some of the things he says, but she'll write the narrative in a way to cast herself as he did this to her, he hurt her, and this is her only choice. So she'll get the
Mhm.
neighborhood up in arms over it, so that when he
Mhm.
then says whatever she predicts he's going to say, they'll say, that's what she said he'd say. And then they'll say, well, that's not what she told me. She actually said you did this and this and this. So they'll get people in to manipulate and judge you for your behavior. They'll anticipate that and then begin to get people to run ahead and ruin your reputation or criticize
Mm.
you or ostracize you or isolate you.
So when you see somebody constantly having other people do their bidding,
Yeah.
that is a sign.
Yes.
You know,
That's flying
uh,
monkeys. They're behaving like flying monkeys. Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Now there was someone in the chat. They actually have a bit of notoriety. So I don't know. Um, he's from the Howard Stern show, but so I kind of think maybe he's joking. But he says, "Hi, Coach Love. I like this topic because I'm a narcissist." So maybe he's joking, right? But what would you say if someone admitted to being a narcissist? How should you handle them?
Well, you'd have to begin to think, what is the advantage of them telling you this information? Remember, if we go back to my analogy of the whole world's at war, and
Mm-hmm.
this is a competition, then what would be his advantage for saying that? Probably, if nothing else, is just to create more topic conversations so that we're now focusing on him, which, by the way, we're focusing on him. So it's working, right? It's working.
Well,
So
you know what? I started, and that's what I said. Wait, but this is a great question because sometimes people tell you who they are.
exactly.
And Maya Angelou said, when people tell you who they are, believe them.
Exactly. In fact, that was one of my other 0.7 points is is to say when someone says something, believe them. My ex on his first date said he didn't need anybody.
Mm-hmm.
He actually told me he didn't need anybody. I should have heard that and thought, this is a person who's going to be interested in intimacy. He's certainly not going to depend on me. He's already an island. He just told me he's an island. Believe him. He's an island. But
Wow.
we often think, well, maybe they mean that for everybody else, but I'm going to be the exception. See, there's our grandiosity, our narcissism that then blinds us to what they just said. Or we think, but I can save them from that. No, honey, you're not going to save this person.
No, 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 no. Let's do another vocabulary word. Hoovering. What's that?
Yeah, hoovering is when it's think of a vacuum. It's like a Hoover vacuum. So they're going to sort of suck you back in. That's what's going to happen here. So what happens is there's stages to a narcissistic relationship. When you meet somebody and they decided you're a great target, then they begin to love bomb you. They present themselves as being your ideal perfect match, and they begin to camouflage themselves and look like you. That's what will happen, is they look like you. So you think you've met your twin flame, your soulmate, the person who totally gets you, but you don't realize what you're seeing is you're seeing yourself mirrored back in order to develop this rapid rapport and develop rapid trust. Then as the relationship starts to embark and get more real and you start to do life together, then the narcissist realizes that you're not their dream person. You're not matching up to what they fantasized in their head. And you're starting to see more of who they truly actually are. And as a result, then there's more, the illusion starts to fall apart and you start to have conflict. And it becomes more ordinary. And plus, a lot of narcissists have issues with boredom. So it becomes more humdrum. And as a result, then they're not as interested in the relationship. It becomes tedious, and they don't like tedious. They like exciting. This is no longer exciting to live life together and talk about bills and go to work and raise a family. That's tedious. So as a result, they then begin to look for where their next big attraction is going to be. Maybe it's the next adventure with work or another project or another relationship, but they begin to move into something that's going to bring back that thrill, that excitement. That's called the discard phase. So as that happens, and then the relationship falls apart and it is over, it ends, you move on. If you start to heal and move on and get a life and do well, they never see you as fully separate from them. They always see you like that salvage car parked behind the house. Like they may not want to ever drive it again, but they still feel like it belongs to them. And so when they see you start to do well, say that you look good, you're getting on with your life, or worse yet, you start to date, they then think, I don't want her or him to have freedom like that. I want them back. And maybe I missed something about them. So they then begin to try to pull you back in, and that's called hoovering. So
Wow.
as a result of that, then if you are not fully recovered and really understood what happens, you may think, oh, they're trying, they do love me. Maybe there is something to this, because we kind of get idealistic again, and then we move back into the relationship. But here's the big problem. They now know that they've discarded you and that they can get you back in. So they have less respect for you the second time around than they did the first time. So it goes wrong faster than it did the first time around.
So interesting. You mentioned a cycle in one of your TikToks. I think that I have it. I hope I'm going to pull up the right one. Let's see.
You heard of the narcissist drama triangle? They play 3 different roles that cycle in and out. There's the savior, the bully, and the magician. You meet the savior first. He sets the stage and makes you feel like you can open up and be vulnerable. The bully whips in and hurts you with a lie, gaslighting, or some snarky comment that leaves you emotionally bloody and wounded. The magician comes in and waves his wand and says it was all a big mistake and it didn't really mean that, causing you to wonder what's real. And then the savior shows back up and you think, oh, all's better again. And this drama goes round and around and around. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the drama, what happens in the relationship while the relationship's ongoing. What I'm talking about, there's actually even a larger drama stage that's going on, which is idealization, or called love bombing, then disillusionment, which is where it starts to get boring, and then the discarding, which then they get ready to get rid of you, move on to someone else, and then they start it over with someone new. Or once they discard you and you start to do better and they want to see, maybe they want to retry it again, they'll move back into idealization, back into disillusionment, and back into discard. So that's a bigger drama going on around the relationship. But within the relationship, there's these constant drama and conflict. And that's how that cycle, the narcissist drama triangle, is what happens within around conflict, is that you meet a really good guy, they act like they've helped you out. Then all of a sudden they bully you or jab at you or make a hurtful statement or gaslight you. You get very, very upset. Then they come back and say, oh, they didn't mean that. You misunderstood. That's the magician. And then the savior comes back and tries to make it right by going out and buying you something really new or doing some grand gesture until they bully you again.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to talk about this in platonic relationships, like female on female. What does that look like? Because I notice sometimes there's the mirroring, and then there's there is competition. But then they, girlfriend will do something really, really nice, but they're kind of being, I don't know, weird in the relationship. It's like they pretend maybe to really like the same things you like, or they want it. A necessary weeing of the whole thing. It's like, well, no, this is my thing and that's your thing. You have your thing and let me have my thing.
Right. Yeah, you're identifying it well. There is the same sort of nature of it, the same competition where there's going to be excessive envy. And then, so they see everybody as who's higher, top dog, and who's not. And they will get very envious of your accomplishments and try to then somehow sabotage it or beat you to it, take advantage of you in some way. They see others in sort of a strategic way, like an asset. How can you accentuate their life? I'm thinking of the movie, for example, about the Mean Girls. Every person in that group, there was a reason why that person was in that group. There was an advantage that person brought to the relationship, to the main character.
I like how you said that. The person thinks of you as how can you help their life. What word did you use?
The advantage. What advantage do you bring?
Yeah, what advantage do you bring to their life? I had someone, sometimes they made me feel like an accessory and to their life. And they actually said to me, for me not to do, like, basically excel without their permission. They don't want to see me out here doing XYZ without letting them know. I was like, and I thought to myself, she could not be listening to herself. I know she did not hear herself say that. It was astonishing.
I had somebody actually tell me when I was writing the book not to get my hopes up that it wouldn't be a bestseller because she didn't want me to get my feelings hurt. And she said she was doing me a favor.
Yeah.
This was when I was having some success and really my social platform was growing and hers was not. And so she sort of said it as, I want you to know because I'm really watching out for your best interest. No, you're not. You're competing with me.
Yes, it is so hard, or tell you even if what you are doing, you're just getting started in something, say you're little this, or you're, kind of minimizing whatever you are doing. So I have just learned to pick up on these clues, but quite honestly, other than just pull back from the relationship with the person, I don't know what the right thing to do. What is it? What do you do?
That's the problem. There isn't any other really good thing to do because they'll corner you. Whatever you do, they'll make it to be the wrong move if it's not the move they want you to do. For example, let me go back to that example I was giving you about when she said that I don't want you to get your feelings hurt. And I said, how about we just stick to talking about things that we're working on together? Let's not talk about each other's personal projects. And then she said, I'm not for sure I can have a relationship with you because you're too sensitive. I can't even be myself around you. So there, when I drew a boundary, see now the boundary is being criticized because it didn't meet their expectations. So I think what you're going to find, this is something for you to try out. I think you're going to find that if you meet someone like that, whatever you do, they're going to attack.
Okay.
And you're going to find that it's pretty like somebody else, I saw a comment flip through that they don't like stability, and they're not healthy. And so whatever you do to try to gain stability and make the relationship healthy, they're going to not participate and do it because they need it to be this way for them to maintain the control. They won't feel safe
Wow.
because when you start to take care of yourself, then they're not in control of that, and that makes them feel unsafe.
That is so good. That is so, so good. Um, I can see why you are just blossoming and blooming. Um, you're fabulous. You're
Oh,
just
you.
you're just fabulous. I'm curious a little bit about your book, like what people might find in your book. I know that it's a story, but do you have any particular nuggets that you want to share from your book?
I think the thing that it brings to the table for people is that it normalizes their experience. They helps them to know that there is nothing too outrageous, that this can happen to even to somebody who seems to have their act together, who should
Mhm.
have been able to know better, but still got pulled into it. So I think it offers hope to the readers. And then for those who really don't understand what happens, it gives them an inside view of what it's like to be in these toxic relationships. What I've noticed in the public is there's a lot of criticism towards victims. And here's why it's so insidious and dangerous for us to judge victims. When somebody does something to someone else, do you think they want attention to what they're doing? They don't
Hmm.
want to be called out, and they certainly don't want to be held accountable. They would rather turn the spotlight onto the one who had it happen as being weak or the problem. Everybody who's ever been victimized needs to get their act together and stop being victims, and when we would be better for that. The problem is, who's doing the victimization? It's the one who's
Correct.
attacking the victim. Why are they attacking the victim? Because they don't want to be the ones to be held accountable or to have to change.
Hmm.
So one of the things I hope will happen through the books called Love You More, The Harrowing
Yeah.
Tales of Lies, Sex Addiction, and Double Cross. And I'll
Hold it
make
up again. Hold it up
yeah,
again. Let
well,
me.
the problem is I have this blurry thing on. So there you go.
Oh, I got it.
Love
Yes,
You
and
More.
it
The
is
Harrowing
called Love You More. It is called Love You More.
Yep, The Harrowing Tale of Lie. So funny because it's a mirror image, so it's hard for me to yeah. So
Got
it's so hard for me to show it. But when we do that, when we attack victims and say victims need to be less a victim, we're actually colluding with the abusers.
it. Mm-hmm.
By saying there's a problem with the victim, we attack victims. We collude with the abusers and then attack the victims. So one of the things I'm hoping to draw light to is the fact that this is way more complex than people think it is. It's extremely, in fact, there's now research coming out showing that the same programming that goes into cults to pull people into cults, into the programming, the brainwashing, that's what's happening to every victim who finds themselves in a narcissistic abusive relationship. They have
Mm.
been essentially brainwashed. They are held trapped and immobilized by this extremely toxic combination of intermittent giving of love and then punishment. And it causes, as somebody else mentioned in the comments, a trauma bond. And so they are very held, trapped, and paralyzed by this incredible bond. So I'm hoping that people will then see what has happened to me to know how confusing it is, because I let you into my world so you can hear what my thoughts are and why I'm so conflicted. So you get an inside look of the trauma bond.
Wow. So speaking of confusing, how, as an outsider, can people tell who's telling the truth? Because this is what I've noticed. A a person they'll do something and then they create this narrative as if they're the victim when they're not the victim. And so, how does an outsider know what the truth is?
Yeah, I've seen that. I know of several situations in which the people who are actually the toxic ones believe that they're the victim. That's a common, they'll take that on, that they've been the one victimized. I think for the rest of us, what we should do is watch what they say and compare it to what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
those who are toxic will have an inconsistency between what's said and what's done. So they'll
Mm,
say they beat me up and they're so mean to me, but then you'll see them failing to be consistent at work, or when they had a date with their children, they don't make it, they don't show up, or you'll see all this, or they'll have their new partner take over and deal with the that are dealing with. You'll see all this kind of drama that they're creating, but then while they're accusing the other person of actually being the difficult one. So that's one thing I
exactly.
would watch
Exactly.
for. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
watch for that inconsistency, that instability.
Right. I think also an inability to observe or adhere to a simple boundary.
Yeah, yeah,
If the person is communicating that they cannot um, adhere to a very simple boundary, I think maybe that's a red flag as well. You have given us so much. I would be honored if you would, come back and just spend some more time with us, because I feel like we've barely scratched the surface on this. It's been fabulous, just absolutely magnificent. I
oh, thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you. I
Thank
would love to. This has been a wonderful time. I've really enjoyed myself.
it went by way too fast. It really did. The everybody loves you here, and just come back. Maybe we can talk about children and narcissistic parents. You know,
Mhm,
I'm
mhm.
doing some work in July on on adolescent relationships. So maybe I can have you back in July. You
That would be
know.
wonderful. And I'm also putting together an online course on cognitive dissonance. So that's something
Ooh,
else to talk about. There's a great attention being paid to what it is. Because here's why, Erica, this is why it's so concerning, is that cognitive dissonance over a long period of time actually causes brain changes. It causes mental deterioration. So
mhm.
they're seeing where people who are stuck in these relationships and can't get out are complaining of being in agonizing pain, and that they have this mental fog and decreased mental functioning, and it's real. They're actually seeing structural neurological changes on imaging. Isn't that
I,
alarming?
that is extremely alarming. And if you don't mind, give us the definition of cognitive dissidence.
Yeah, cognitive dissonance actually happens in normal life. You've experienced it today probably multiple times.
Yes, yes.
It's whenever you're faced with a choice and you have to make a decision and you don't for a moment know what decision to make, that little pang that you have is
Hmm.
cognitive dissonance. We It helps us make decisions. But what
Hmm.
happens in these deceptive relationships is everything feels wrong. And because it feels wrong, we don't know what's real and we can't make a decision. So as a result, it becomes long standing, a chronic condition. And our bodies, our minds weren't meant for a chronic state of cognitive dissonance. So as a result of it, it creates it actually is deteriorating, and it creates a mental agony. In fact, the number one complaint people have of narcissistic abuse is that they are in agony. They are in agony.
Wow.
Yeah, they can't make a decision. They don't know. So there's stages of cognitive dissonance. So in the first part, you think, do I even know who I'm in a relationship with? What's real? And then the
Hmm.
second stage is, I don't know what I should do about this relationship. Do, do I go? Do I stay? And then near the end, you start to say, I'm not making any decision. Is there something wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me.
Mm, mm. Okay. Um, I want to say one last question, but I keep coming up with more. But before you leave, you had seven tips. If you would just run through those before I let you get out of here, I greatly
Absolutely.
appreciate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Coach Love. I appreciate that. So, narcissism, tip number one, narcissism is more common than you think. And because narcissistic people and sociopathic people burn through a lot of relationships. So, be aware that not everybody thinks the way that you think and that there are dangerous people in the world. Number two, don't assume everybody sees the world exactly the way that you do, and don't assume that everyone has benevolent or goodwill towards you. They don't. There are actually predators, there are sharks in the world, and we need to be aware and be warned about them. Number three, if a relationship in the beginning seems to be too good to be true, it is. It's not true. Chances are you've met somebody who's camouflaging and mirroring you, and as a result, you have met yourself, and that's a very intoxicating experience. So be careful on that. Number 4, remember that your story and your trust has to be earned. Nobody has a right to it. They need to show up and prove that they're worthy of hearing your story and having your trust. Number 5, if you hear a statement about somebody's availability or interest, like I did, which is I don't need anyone, or maybe someone says to you, I don't really want a relationship, whatever you hear, believe it, because they're telling you the truth. They have just told you they're a mission statement. So here it is, a mission statement. Number 6, don't fall in love with somebody's potential. That's not who you're going to be living with. You're going to be living with the reality, not their potential. And number 7, don't give your best to someone else first. Give your best to yourself first, and then give out of that sufficiency to the rest of the world, which will be more than enough.
Oh my goodness. I don't know if I can wait till July. So good. So good. So good. Oh, thank you so much, Carrie. It has been a pleasure. Your book. Did you tell them about your podcast? Did you tell them?
No, I didn't. I have a podcast now. It's on Mondays and Fridays at 8 a.m. in the morning called Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. For about an hour, I take TikTok live listeners' questions and then answer them. So it's a live experience. So I'm taking real questions from the audience and then I answer them, but I go into a lot of education like I do here tonight. So you can find it wherever you hear podcasts, called Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much, Carrie. What a fabulous guest. Please do come back anytime, Carrie. Thank you. Just been fabulous. All right, guys, the night is still young. I have an Olympic champion for you. Plus, I have some chat woman to woman. I am going to drop the second link here for you guys. Please do click the link. I'll be back shortly. And just absolutely thank you guys for coming. I will see you soon. Bye-bye for now.
You're winning. You're winning.